Raven Johnson snubbing Caitlin Clark on a high five, dare I say it? The gym was completely silent when the ultimate sign of disrespect played out in real time, proving that some grudges don't just survive the transition to the pros. They mutate into something much darker and far more permanent. Everyone thought the bad blood had been left on the college hardwood, assuming that the transition to the professional level would somehow magically erase the bitter history between these elite athletes. But a massive rumor has just set the sports world on fire, claiming that day one of an elite training camp crossover was completely derailed by a brutal, unflinching refusal to shake hands. It wasn't just a simple miscommunication or an accidental oversight born out of exhaustion, but a deliberate, icy rejection involving Caitlin Clark, a fiercely loyal veteran ally named Sophie, and the one player who has haunted Caitlin's legacy for the past 2 years, Raven Johnson. When whispers of this jaw-dropping camp drama leaked onto social media from insider text threads and burner accounts, it absolutely shattered the internet, leaving fans, analysts, and former players scrambling to figure out what really happened behind those locked, windowless doors. To understand why a simple, customary handshake turned into a psychological war zone, you have to realize that this wasn't a sudden flare-up of ego, but the violent boiling over of a toxic rivalry that has been brewing under intense, suffocating media scrutiny for over a year. The roots of this vicious camp standoff go much deeper than a single day of practice, stretching back to a time when both players were fighting for absolute supremacy in the collegiate ranks. The underlying tension actually traces back to a moment that has been permanently burned into the retinas of basketball fans forever, a moment of such pure, unadulterated disrespect that it literally changed the trajectory of 2 careers and fundamentally altered the way women's college basketball is consumed by the masses. Picture the 2023 Final Four in Dallas. The arena lights were blinding, the stakes astronomically high, and Caitlin Clark pulled off a defensive maneuver that was so humiliating, it felt like a physical slap in the face to the entire South Carolina roster, a team that had built an absolute dynasty on intimidation and dominance. She looked directly at Raven Johnson, who was standing behind the three-point line perfectly positioned for an open shot. And instead of closing out or establishing a defensive stance, Caitlin simply waved her off, blatantly refusing to guard her and signaling to the entire world that she viewed her opponent as an absolute, undeniable non-threat. That single dismissive wave went violently viral within seconds, dominating major sports networks, flooding social media timelines across every platform, and turning what could have been a brilliant strategic defensive play into a massive cultural flashpoint that deeply divided basketball fans across the globe. For the casual viewer sitting at home, it was just a spicy, highly entertaining highlight that fit perfectly into the modern era of viral sports clips. But for the young woman on the receiving end, it was a deeply personal public humiliation that tore at her mental foundation and almost pushed her out of the sport entirely. But what happened next behind the scenes, away from the flashing cameras and roaring crowds, would shock everyone who thought the story ended with a viral meme. Instead of brushing it off and moving forward, the crushing weight of that viral embarrassment dragged the young South Carolina guard into a dark psychological space where the noise of the internet became entirely deafening, echoing in her mind every single time she stepped onto a basketball court. Reports later surfaced indicating that the mental toll was so severe that she considered walking away from basketball completely, feeling the overwhelming weight of millions of people endlessly mocking a single moment of vulnerability on the sport's biggest stage. It took a massive, emotionally draining intervention from legendary head coach Dawn Staley, combined with a grueling off-season of grinding in the shadows, to begin the slow process of rebuilding confidence and turning public humiliation into highly focused motivation. She spent countless hours in empty gyms, putting up shot after shot, transforming the very weakness that had been mocked on national television into a weapon she hoped to unleash on her biggest rival. When the 2024 national championship game finally arrived, breaking television viewership records across the sport, the narrative had completely flipped. South Carolina didn't just beat Iowa, they systematically and ruthlessly seized control of the moment, rewriting the story that had followed them for more than a year. Dismantled them on both ends of the floor. But that same dismissed guard played a pivotal, lockdown defensive role against the very player who had humiliated her a year earlier, famously ripping the ball completely out of her hands in a viral moment of her own that felt like pure, unadulterated poetic justice. The post-game atmosphere was incredibly thick with unspoken words, featuring a brutal, lingering stare-down of vindication that supposedly closed the chapter on the beef forever. But in the hyper-competitive, ego-driven world of elite basketball, vengeance rarely brings true peace. But that wasn't the whole story of this bitter rivalry, because the basketball gods had already set the stage for their paths to cross again. The transition from collegiate superstardom to the professional grind is notoriously ruthless, a brutal reality check where past accomplishments, viral moments, and even national championship rings mean absolutely nothing the second you step onto a professional court, and lingering collegiate beefs are supposed to be left at the door. Yet the complex ecosystem of elite women's basketball is incredibly interconnected, featuring highly exclusive USA minicamps, private off-season open gyms, and intense crossover scrimmages where top-tier college prospects routinely clash with newly drafted rookies and seasoned veterans. It was in one of these highly exclusive, untelevised environments, often referred to by insiders as the ultimate proving grounds, that the paths of these bitter rivals reportedly crossed again, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation that absolutely no one in the building was prepared to witness. Reports immediately began leaking from well-connected insiders and anonymous staff members that during a highly contested, physical Day 1 scrimmage session, the underlying hostility was palpable from the very first whistle, radiating through the gym and making every player on the floor aware of the dark history between the two. This wasn't just about competing for a roster spot or getting quality reps against elite competition. This was a deeply personal, fiercely contested territory war where aggressive body language spoke louder than any verbal trash talk ever could. Every screen was set a little harder. Every closeout was dangerously aggressive. And the unspoken tension hung in the air like heavy smoke, threatening to ignite into a full-blown physical altercation at any moment. And what allegedly leaked next from that secretive camp changed everything people thought they knew about the deeply personal nature of this situation. Enter the alleged wild card in this explosive scenario, a fiery, notoriously unapologetic veteran presence known simply as Sophie, who reportedly stepped into the chaotic fray not just as a teammate, but as an intimidating enforcer drawing a hard, undeniable line in the sand. In professional and elite-level sports, highly touted rookies often rely heavily on established veterans to navigate the treacherous, politically complex waters of locker-room dynamics. But when a veteran actively participates in icing out a specific opponent, it elevates a personal grudge into a full-blown faction war. According to the whispers circulating among insiders, the dynamic duo made it clear they wanted absolutely nothing to do with the South Carolina standout, deliberately isolating her during partner drills and exchanging icy glares that communicated unmistakable disdain to anyone watching. This kind of psychological warfare is actually common in elite professional environments where mental toughness is tested just as rigorously as physical skill. But seeing it allegedly play out so openly against a specific rival sent shockwaves through the coaching staff and the rest of the players in attendance. It was a clear and unmistakable message that the disrespect of the past had not been forgotten, that apologies were neither wanted nor offered, and that the social hierarchy of this new environment would be established through intimidation and influence. The gym quickly divided into silent factions, with players nervously observing the toxic dynamic, fully aware that stepping in could instantly place them in the crosshairs of the powerful alliance that had formed. But the absolute breaking point of the entire camp, the moment that would allegedly become the defining image of the controversy, was still yet to come. When the final whistle of the grueling session finally blew and the customary line formed at center court for handshakes and mutual respect, the tension in the facility reportedly reached a suffocating, almost unbearable peak that left bystanders completely speechless, paralyzed in anticipation. The handshake line is one of the most sacred traditions in sports, the brief moment where competitors who just spent an entire game battling each other acknowledge a shared respect for the contest. That is exactly why a refusal to participate is often viewed as a powerful statement. As the exhausted players slowly moved through the line, exchanging handshakes and brief words of respect, the leaked narrative claims that Caitlin and veteran ally Sophie intentionally broke formation, avoided eye contact, and declined to extend a hand when they reached their longtime rival. According to the rumor, the gym fell into an eerie silence. The kind of uncomfortable quiet that immediately draws everyone's attention when something unexpected happens. In that version of events, one of the sport's most respected traditions was abruptly interrupted, leaving players and observers stunned. It was described as a calculated snub that many online observers quickly connected to the energy of the original wave-off incident, reinforcing the perception that the rivalry had never truly faded. To supporters of that interpretation, it suggested that no amount of time, maturity, or championship success had completely erased the tension between the two sides. For the player allegedly left standing without a handshake, it was portrayed as a reminder that some rivalries never fully disappear. For those accused of delivering the snub, it was viewed by supporters as a statement that they were unwilling to revisit or relitigate the past. And the fallout from that single reported moment would soon take on a life of its own. Within hours, whispers of the alleged incident spread beyond the walls of the private training facility and exploded across social media. Basketball discussions on Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, and countless sports forums quickly became dominated by debates surrounding what supposedly happened. Fans who had spent years arguing about the original wave-off suddenly found themselves dissecting an entirely new chapter in the rivalry. Conversations about sportsmanship, competition, respect, and personal grudges immediately flooded the internet. Sports podcasts, digital commentators, and content creators began breaking down every detail of the rumor, debating whether the alleged interaction reflected genuine hostility or whether the entire story had been amplified through second-hand accounts and speculation. Online communities quickly split into opposing camps. One side defended the alleged behavior as a reflection of old-school competitive mentality, arguing that athletes should not be expected to manufacture friendships or perform respect for public consumption if genuine personal differences exist. The opposing side criticized the reported actions as unnecessary and unprofessional, arguing that elite athletes should rise above personal grievances and serve as examples for younger players watching the sport continue to grow. As more reactions poured in, the narrative became increasingly difficult to verify. Rumors, interpretations, and speculation blended together until separating fact from exaggeration became nearly impossible. Yet regardless of what actually happened inside that gym, the discussion revealed something much larger about the current state of women's basketball. What this widely discussed training camp story exposed to many casual fans was the reality that elite competition is often fueled by personal rivalries, emotional investment, and psychological battles that extend far beyond the final score. For years, athletes in women's basketball were frequently presented as polished ambassadors focused solely on promoting the game. But the modern era has highlighted something far more complex. These are elite competitors with strong personalities, fierce ambitions, and long memories. Many players use criticism, setbacks, viral moments, and public scrutiny as motivation. Rivalries become part of the fuel that drives performance at the highest level. In that environment, even something as simple as a handshake can take on symbolic meaning. Whether intentional or misunderstood, such moments are often interpreted as statements about confidence, boundaries, and competitive mentality. The current era of women's basketball increasingly resembles other historic periods of professional sports where rivalries became central to the growth of the game. Fans are drawn to competition, conflict, redemption stories, and emotional investment. Whether this training camp rumor was exaggerated through the internet rumor mill or accurately reflected what happened behind closed doors, it demonstrates one thing clearly: the rivalry that began on the college hardwood continues to capture attention at the professional level. And as these highly talented and heavily scrutinized athletes continue to dominate headlines while helping elevate the sport to new levels of popularity, one question remains. Will this rivalry eventually produce another defining showdown on the professional stage, or is the ongoing tension itself becoming part of what keeps fans endlessly invested in every new chapter of the story?